Welcome to Roots of Fear. In April of 1841, an announcement was made by Silas Rutledge that shocked even the cruelest plantation owners in South Carolina. His daughter Catherine, a 28-year-old woman weighing over 260 pounds, was to be placed under the complete authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross. Not as a nurse, not as a companion, but as her owner in every way that mattered except on paper. Scandalized was the white society of Colleton County, but they had no idea what Rutledge was truly doing or what to Catherine would be done by Ezekiel Cross over the following months. By November, Catherine's body had changed in ways no one could explain. 13 men were dead, and nothing but ash was Cypress Grove Plantation. What really happened between that enslaved man and the daughter of the plantation owner? What did he do to her that terrified everyone who witnessed it? Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. With oppressive heat and humidity that made the air feel solid, spring in Colleton County arrived. Slowly through the low country moved the Coombe River, its dark water reflecting Spanish moss that from live oak trees hung like funeral shrouds. For miles stretched rice paddies. Worked by hundreds of enslaved people were their flooded fields, people who moved through water up to their knees from dawn until dusk. Built on suffering was this wealth. Extracted from human misery was this prosperity. All of it was justified by men who convinced themselves that cruelty was simply the natural order of things. On 800 acres of moderately productive land sat Cypress Grove Plantation. Its owner, Silas Rutledge, was not quite part of the county's elite, but he wanted to be desperately. 58 enslaved people were owned by him, which made him wealthy by most standards, but barely qualified him as mid-tier in local society. Thousands of acres and hundreds of slaves were owned by the truly powerful families. In Charleston they summered and their children to universities in the North they sent. Their names carried a weight that could open doors or destroy reputations with a single word. In 1812, Silas had married Elizabeth Yangtze, a union that brought moderate land holdings and a respected surname. A practical woman had Elizabeth been, one who kept meticulous records and seemed more interested in profit margins than social climbing. Giving birth in 1813 to a daughter christened Catherine, Elizabeth died. For 28 years, Silas raised Catherine alone while focusing his energies on gaining entry to the inner circles of county power. A tall man he was, thin in the way of people who forget to eat when consumed by obsession. Prematurely his hair had gone grey, giving him a severe appearance that matched his cold temperament. In business, he was known for being shrewd, but honorable enough, the kind of man who would drive hard bargains, but keep his word. Isolated had his daughter Catherine grown up, educated by tutors, never quite belonging anywhere. By 1841, she was 28 years old and nearly 260 pounds she weighed. From years of medications prescribed by doctors who diagnosed her with hysteria and female nervous disorders, her body was swollen. She suffered violent fits where she would scream and throw objects. With a letter opener the previous year, she had attacked her father, leaving a scar across his left hand. With false sympathy, the white society of Colleton County whispered about her. Poor Silas Rutledge, burdened with a mad daughter. What a shame! Such a pretty child she had been. The truth was known by none of them. What Catherine had witnessed when she was 12 years old was known by none of them, or that her madness was not madness at all, but a rational response to living with monsters. On April 7th, the letter arrived, delivered by private courier. In his study, Silas opened it, expecting business correspondence. Instead, he found 3 pages on expensive paper sealed with red wax bearing a symbol he recognized immediately. A scythe crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. The Brethren, 13 men who gathered in darkness to perform rituals they believed strengthened the land through blood sacrifice. Old European traditions they mixed with beliefs borrowed from enslaved people who understood spirits and power. That the strong were meant to consume the weak, literally when necessary, they believed. In 1822, Silas had been initiated. Perhaps 40 gatherings over 19 years he had attended, participating in rituals that ranged from disturbing to monstrous. That he was in debt, the letter informed him. $12,000 borrowed over years of gambling losses and failed investments, an impossible sum. Most of his land and all his slaves would be required for repayment, destroying everything he had built. But an alternative was offered by the letter, a demonstration of commitment from members in difficult positions. His daughter Catherine would be taken by Silas and placed under the complete authority of one of his enslaved men, not temporarily, not as punishment, but as a genuine transfer of responsibility lasting 1 full year. Total control over her person, her daily activities, her treatment would be had by the enslaved man. At a gathering of the county's prominent families, Silas would announce this publicly, explaining it as an extreme medical measure for his daughter's condition. Absolute would be the humiliation. In a society where white women were supposedly precious and protected above all others, Silas would be declaring his daughter worth less than his property. But if he agreed, his debt would be forgiven, and financial support would be provided by the Brethren to restore his position. For hours that night, Silas sat in his study. About his options he thought. Completely would bankruptcy destroy him. To every judge, every lawyer, every politician in the region, the Brethren had connections. They could make him disappear if he became a problem. Or he could sacrifice his daughter's dignity to maintain his own position, the choice society had trained him to make. Property over people, power over morality. By candlelight he wrote his acceptance and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived with a name and brief history. Ezekiel Cross, age 33. Purchased recently through an intermediary from a Virginia plantation. Carpentry and herbal medicine were among his skills. Listed as quiet and obedient was his temperament. What the letter did not say was that Ezekiel Cross had been selected specifically for this purpose, that his placement at Cypress Grove was no accident, that he carried his own burning need for justice and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment. On April 13th, Ezekiel arrived in a wagon driven by a slave trader named Henderson. Directly to the main house pulled the wagon, unusual since most slave transactions happen near the barns. Onto the porch came Silas, shading his eyes against the morning sun. In the wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The first thing noticed by Silas was his eyes. As a survival mechanism, most enslaved people kept their gaze down, but directly at Silas looked Ezekiel, his expression calm and assessing. Deeply uncomfortable it made Silas. Tall was Ezekiel, perhaps 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders and lean muscle from a lifetime of hard labor. Unmarked by whipping scars was his skin. Simple but clean were his clothes. Large and calloused were his hands, but his fingers had a precision that suggested skilled work rather than just brute force. Down climbed Henderson and handed papers to Silas. Ezekiel Cross as requested. Quiet but capable was what the previous owner said. Carefully selected was this one, your associates want you to know. Barely at the papers did Silas glance. He addressed Ezekiel directly. You understand why you are here? Yes, sir. Deep and measured was Ezekiel's voice with a slight Virginia accent. Unwell is my daughter. For her care, you will be responsible. Doctors have failed. Knowledge of herbal treatments you claim. A healer was my grandmother, sir. Before I was sold, she taught me. Quickly the transaction completed. To a small cabin near the main house, separate from other slave quarters, was Ezekiel shown. Basic supplies were given to him and that his duties would begin the next day, he was told. That his sole responsibility was Catherine's care and that failure would have severe consequences, he was informed. Yes, sir, said Ezekiel when required. Then he was left alone. For the first time since arriving, he allowed his expression to change, slightly his jaw unclenched, his shoulders relaxed. On the bed he sat and from inside his shirt pulled a small cloth bundle. Carefully he unwrapped it, revealing a piece of worn paper with 3 names written in a child's uncertain handwriting. Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth, his wife, his son, his daughter, sold away from him 3 years ago to a plantation in Alabama known for working slaves to death. Within 18 months, he had learned they all died, Sarah from untreated fever, Benjamin from an injury that turned septic, Ruth from simply giving up, a 6-year-old child who stopped eating because she could not understand why her family had been torn apart. And Silas Rutledge had been the one to sell them. Not because he needed money, not because they had done anything wrong, but because to the brethren he had been demonstrating that he could make hard decisions without sentimentality. Like kindling for burning, he had split a family. South for 2 years had Ezekiel spent working his way, deliberately getting sold from plantation to plantation, always gathering information. Through whispers, he learned about the brethren. About their rituals and members, he learned. That they considered themselves above any consequence, he learned. When the opportunity came to be sold to Rutledge specifically, this was his chance, Ezekiel knew. To Rutledge's house, to his secrets, to his vulnerabilities, he would have access. And sometimes justice came not from courts or laws, but from patience and planning, and from being willing to become exactly as monstrous as necessary. The paper with the 3 names he folded and tucked away. Then in darkness he lay back and stared at the ceiling and began planning what came next. On April 14th began his first day. A house slave named Judith, middle-aged with graying hair, brought him to Catherine's room on the 2nd floor. Reluctantly she knocked. Miss Catherine, your father has brought someone to help with your treatments. From inside, a crash, something heavy hitting the wall. Then Catherine's voice, slurred but venomous. I do not want more treatments. Send him away. At Ezekiel, Judith looked with sympathy. Bad days she has. This is one. The door was opened by Ezekiel and he stepped inside, closing it before Judith could follow. Large but dark was the room. Heavy curtains drawn. Stale was the air, smelling of unwashed bedding and something else, the sweet rot smell of mercury. Across the floor were scattered books, a shattered picture against the wall, clothes everywhere. In a chair by the cold fireplace sat Catherine, wrapped in a stained dressing gown. Loose and tangled hung her dark hair. Puffy was her face, unfocused her eyes. Continuously on the chair arms, her hands trembled. At Ezekiel she looked with confusion, then fear, then anger. "Who are you?" I said. "No more doctors." "A doctor I am not, miss. Ezekiel is my name. To help you, your father asked me." Harshly she laughed. "Help? That is what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. Poison they mean. Chains they mean. Silence they mean." Suddenly she stood, swaying. "What this is, I know. Again he is punishing me for remembering, for speaking, for refusing to forget." Still stood Ezekiel, non-threatening. "What are you supposed to forget?" Off guard, the question caught her. To something more vulnerable, her anger flickered. "You do not know." "Nothing I know, miss. Only that unwell you are, your father says." Intently studied him Catherine as if really seeing him for the first time. "From here you are not. Virginia originally, miss. In this house, do you know what happens? What they do in the cellar?" Quickened Ezekiel's pulse, but neutral he kept his expression. "What you mean, I do not know. No heat in it, just exhaustion." Liar. Everyone lies. Easier than truth it is. Heavily she Saturday. Alone leave me. Failed, tell my father his newest torment. But to the window moved Ezekiel and drew open the curtains. In flooded sunlight. Cried out Catherine, covering her eyes. "Outside, when did you last go?" "Far I cannot walk. Too weak I am." "Without laudanum, when did you last eat?" "Necessary is the medicine." "So say the doctors." "Wrong. What if the doctors are?" From her eyes came down her hands. With hope and terror mixed, she stared at him. "What did you say?" From the window turned Ezekiel. This was the moment, the first card played. I said, "Wrong. What if the doctors are? What if everything you have been told about your condition is designed not to help you, but to keep you controllable? What if for years your father has been poisoning you to ensure you never become well enough to speak about what you saw?" Absolute silence. Wide went Catherine's eyes, stilled her trembling hands. For 30 seconds, she just sat there, her mind working. When she spoke, different was her voice, clearer. He told. Nothing your father told me, miss. But as I have. Mercury poisoning I know. Long-term laudanum use I know. Like this healthy women do not become without someone working hard to make them that way. Why would you say this? Suspicion crept back. A trick this is. Testing me you are. You I am telling, truly well I can help you become, clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room. But easy it will not be. On those medicines for years your body has been dependent. Painful will stopping be. Worse you will feel before better, and approve your father will not. Then why would you do it? Met her eyes Ezekiel. Because my own reasons I have for wanting Silas Rutledge to suffer. And the best way to make him suffer is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and strong enough to speak about it. The truth, dangerous to speak so plainly. But damaged was Catherine, not stupid. Through manipulation she would see, but genuine common cause she might believe. Revenge on my father you want? Yes, miss. To you, what did he do? Sold he did my family, my wife and 2 children. To their death sent them for no reason except to prove something to people who judge worth by cruelty. This absorbed Catherine, then slowly she nodded. The brethren. For the brethren he sold them. Not a question. The brethren, miss. You do not know. Laughed she. Something manic in it. Learn you will. Eventually everyone learns. Forward she leaned. If I agree, if I let you help me. What happens then? Well you get, miss. And when well you are, we decide what to do next. My revenge to plan I have. Yours you have. Perhaps they align. Intently studied him Catherine. Finally, she spoke. Dead I want them all. My father, Judge Peelham, Reverend Crenshaw, all of them. Every man who stood in that cellar. Suffer first I want them to know it is coming, to beg, then dead I want them. Shocking was the venom, not for its intensity, but because from someone dismissed as mad and harmless it came. This was not madness. This was rage concentrated by years of suppression. Nodded Ezekiel. Then an understanding we have, Miss Catherine. Conspirators we are, use my name. I cannot, miss. Not where anyone might hear. Careful we must be. Then know something, Ezekiel. Dangerously glittered Catherine's eyes. Before have I killed 3 people, house slaves who might have told my father about my lucid moments. Exactly how, I cannot remember. Blurs everything the laudanum, but I know I did it. Disappeared they did. Ran away, their families were told. Terribly she smiled. So if betray me you plan, to use me, then dispose of me, know that a victim I am not. Something worse I am. Down Ezekiel's spine ran ice. An ally he had expected, not someone whose capacity for violence might exceed his own, but steady he kept. You I believe, miss, and betray you I will not. Good. More steadily stood Catherine. Then let us begin. But one condition I have. What, miss? When this is over, when our revenge we have had, die I want to. With what I have seen and done, I do not want to live. With that too, you will help me. That had Ezekiel not expected, but committed now he was. Agreed. Then a deal we have. Extended her hand Catherine. After hesitation, shook it Ezekiel. Stronger than expected was her grip. Over the following week, Catherine's treatment was begun by Ezekiel. Gradually he reduced her laudanum, replacing some with herbal tinctures, valerian root for anxiety and sleep, chamomile for digestive distress, milk thistle to help her liver process accumulated toxins. Brutal was the process. With fever, shaking, and vomiting, Catherine spent 3 days in bed. Through it, stayed with her Ezekiel, holding a basin while she was sick, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking quietly just to remind her she was not alone. When the worst passed, weak she was but clearer than she had been in years. Decreased the constant tremor. Less slurred was her speech. On reading she could focus. Then began the real work. Short distances at first had Ezekiel her walking, from her room to the hallway end and back. It exhausted her, but every day a little further he insisted. Her diet he adjusted, bringing lean meats and vegetables instead of heavy pastries. Strictly he limited portions, though she fought him years of using food as comfort, making restriction difficult. While working on her physical recovery, they talked about the cellar, about what she saw at 12, Catherine told him. In detail that made Ezekiel's stomach turn she described it, but without interruption he listened. About years of gaslighting that followed, she told him. Her father convincing everyone, including herself, that she was mad, that she invented memories, that nothing she said could be trusted. About the journal she kept hidden she told him, pages documenting dates and times when her father left late at night, names of visitors at strange hours, sounds from below that should not be possible. About his family, Ezekiel told her, about Sarah who sang while working and taught their children to read despite the danger, about Benjamin who at 8 could do mathematics that amazed overseers, about Ruth who loved flowers and picked wild blooms to make their cabin beautiful. How to the Virginia plantation came Silas with a buyer's warrant, he told her. How like livestock he inspected them. How to purchase all 3 for a reasonable price he agreed, then at the last moment changed terms, saying only the woman and children he needed, not Ezekiel. How deliberately he split the family for no practical reason, but simply because he could. Smiled he when he did it, quietly said Ezekiel. That is what I remember most. Crying my son, holding my leg, begging, my wife trying to be strong, telling Benjamin to be brave, and smiled your father like it pleased him to cause that pain. With newly clear eyes listened Catherine. Sorry I am. A word is just sorry, but I am sorry you suffered because of what my father is. Not responsible for what he does you are, miss. No, but responsible for what I do next I am. And I promise you, Ezekiel, for what he took from you, he will pay. All of them will pay. For April 29th was scheduled the formal announcement. In the Cypress Grove dining room, 41 people gathered for what invitations described as an important family announcement. In carriages arrived the county's elite, Judge Pelam with his wife Eleanor, Reverend Crenshaw with his daughter, Marcus Fanning and his family, Benjamin Lyle from the bank. Elaborate was the meal, oysters, roasted duck, multiple rice dishes, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, a towering cake for dessert. Through it all, at her father's right hand sat Catherine, eating sparingly, speaking when spoken to, but volunteering nothing. Alongside other house slaves served Ezekiel, moving quietly, refilling glasses, clearing plates. To most guests, invisible was he, but to every word he listened, every interaction he watched, information he filed away. After dessert, stood Silas and tapped his glass. My friends, for joining us, thank you. As you know, for years unwell has been Catherine. Every treatment we tried, doctors from Charleston, a specialist from Philadelphia. Nothing helped until recently. Toward Ezekiel he gestured. 2 weeks ago, I brought in Ezekiel, who knowledge of herbal medicine has. As you can see, much improved is Catherine. Clearer, calm, more herself than in many years. Around the table, polite murmurs. Neutral kept Catherine her expression, though beneath the table, her hands gripping her napkin saw Ezekiel. This improvement, continued Silas, has led to a difficult decision. Ongoing care more intensive than our household can provide requires Catherine. After much consideration, full responsibility for my daughter's welfare will be assumed by Ezekiel. Complete authority over her treatment, daily activities, and living arrangements will he have, effective immediately. Change tone the murmurs. Confusion now. Several guests exchanged glances. Shock registered on Mrs. Pelam's face. Up spoke Marcus Fanning. Silas, I do not understand. Under a slave's care permanently you are placing your daughter. With someone who succeeded where others failed, I am placing her. Than social convention, more important is my daughter's health. But surely, carefully interjected Reverend Crenshaw, other options there are. A companion, a nurse, someone more appropriate. Hardened Silas's expression. My decision I have made. Agrees Catherine. Do you not, daughter? All eyes to Catherine turned. This was the moment she could refuse, could expose everything, could bring it all crashing down. Instead, she smiled, small, controlled, revealing nothing. My father's judgment I trust. Kind has been Ezekiel and his treatments help. With this arrangement, I am content. Perfectly delivered. But what others did not, Sir Ezekiel, saw her knuckles white on that napkin, saw the flash in her eyes, promising violence. The required role she was playing, the obedient daughter. But inside she was screaming. In awkward conversation passed the evening. Some guests left early. Others stayed to speak with Silas privately, asking questions they did not want public. Fragments caught Ezekiel. Are you certain this is wise? What will people say? The brethren will not approve of this becoming public. That last from Judge Pelam spoken low near the study. Too quiet to hear was Silas's response, but whatever he said made Pelam nod and clap his shoulder. By midnight, all guests had departed. To her room retired Catherine. To his study went Silas. With clean-up helped Ezekiel, then made his way upstairs. Softly on Catherine's door he knocked. Come in. By the window she sat, still in her dinner dress, looking out at the dark grounds. She did not turn. Done then it is. Officially your responsibility I am. Property of property. How absurd. Feeling how are you, miss? Down with everyone in it, I want to burn this house. But patient we must be. Is that not what you tell me? Yes, miss. Because I want them to feel secure, I agreed. I want them to think this is just my father's eccentricity. I want them to forget about me while we work. To look at him she turned. Their faces did you see? The disgust, the pity. Pathetic they think I am. What we are planning, they have no idea. And what exactly are we planning, miss? To her dresser moved Catherine and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were papers covered in her handwriting. For years, everything I remember I have been documenting. Dates, names, ritual descriptions coded so like nonsense it looks if found. But decode it I can. To destroy 20 men, enough we have. Anus, will anyone believe, miss? A woman recently recovered from madness and an enslaved man. No. Which is why proof we need. Real physical evidence they cannot dismiss. One specific page she pulled out. Where they keep their records, I know. A ledger of all activities maintains the brethren, every ritual, every sacrifice, every member's participation. It ensures everyone is equally guilty. Years ago, my father mentioned it before he realized I would remember. Where is this ledger? In the cellar. A hidden room beyond the main chamber there is. Inside I never saw, but about it I heard them talk. That is where everything they cannot afford to lose they keep. Excitement mixed with dread felt Ezekiel. Such a ledger would be devastating evidence, but getting it meant going into the heart of the brethren's domain. When the house is quiet, we would need to access it. For business, to Charleston monthly travels my father. The next trip is May 14th. Gone he will be 3 days. That gives us 2 weeks to prepare. The cellar layout we need, every room, every hiding place. Help I can. For 16 years about this I have been thinking. Exactly what needs to happen, I know. An hour they spent going over details, speaking in whispers. From memory, the cellar layout sketched Catherine. About guards, keys, slave schedules, asked Ezekiel. When he left her room, it was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning. To his small room he made his way, mind racing. Fully committed now he was to a conspiracy with a woman who was brilliant and damaged and frightening. Out he pulled the paper with his family's names and looked at it by candlelight. For you I am doing this, for Sarah, for Benjamin, for Ruth, for every person who suffered because men like Silas Rutledge believe power gives them the right to destroy lives. Out the candle he blew and in darkness lay, listening to the house settle. Somewhere below in a cellar he had never seen were secrets that could tear apart South Carolina's most powerful families. In 2 weeks down there he would go to find them. With deceptive calm passed the 2 weeks. Improving continued Catherine. Dropped her weight. Sharp stayed her mind. Further each day she walked. More importantly, for Ezekiel she was translating sections of her coded journals, filling in details about the brethren that made his blood run cold. Not unique to Colleton County was the brethren. Of a larger network across the South it was part. Connected societies in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond, different names, but always the same structure. Wealthy men who believed their power derived from ancient practices of dominance and sacrifice, one afternoon explained Catherine. European mystery cults mixed with things learned from enslaved people. Into something monstrous they twisted it. For things that have no justification. And the sacrifices, not always human. Sometimes animals, but other times people who will not be missed they take. Slaves with no family. Poor whites who onto their properties wander. Once a child mentioned my father, but if that was literal, I do not know. Where do bodies go? On every plantation, swamps. In go bodies and are never found. The rest do alligators. And all of it documents this ledger. Every ritual for 40 years. Names, dates, descriptions. Because mutual complicity they need, they keep it. Everyone equally guilty, so no one can expose the others without destroying themselves. On May 14th arrived. For Charleston early morning left Silas, taking his carriage and manservant. With associates he would stay, attend to business, back expected evening of May 16th. That gave them almost 3 full days. Until nightfall they waited before moving. Into evening routine settled the house. By 10, silent was the main house. In Catherine's room they met. Into simple dark clothes she had changed, allowing freedom of movement. Tightly pulled back her hair. Like someone preparing for battle she looked. "Certain are you, miss?" "More certain I have never been." "Let us go." In the kitchen behind the pantry was the cellar entrance. Like wall paneling looked the door, but pressed right, it clicked open, revealing narrow stairs descending into darkness. Immediately hit the smell, damp earth and old smoke and something organic and rotten. His reaction noticed Catherine. "Used to it you get. That you stop smelling it, I wish I could say, but lying I would be." Carefully they descended. Ezekiel carrying a shuttered lantern providing minimal light. Steep and worn were the stairs, wood creaking. After 20 steps, the bottom they reached. Than expected larger was the cellar, easily 30-foot square with low ceiling supported by thick beams. Packed earth was the floor, walls lined with stones weeping moisture. At center was what Catherine called the altar, though now like just a heavy wooden table it looked. But dark stains on its surface and grooves carved in edges told their own story. Around the room were candle holders, clay jars sealed with wax, wooden boxes, a rack holding black robes with crimson trim. Along one wall, shelves containing books and papers. With the certainty of someone following a memorized map moved Catherine. To the far wall she led Ezekiel where stone seemed solid, but one particular stone she pressed and something clicked. Inward swung a section, revealing another chamber. Smaller was this room, 10-foot square, and here its secrets kept the brethren. On a wooden stand in the center sat the ledger. Massive, 2 foot tall and 18 in wide, bound in dark leather with metal clasps. Next to it were smaller journals. Around the walls were shelves containing jars Ezekiel refused to examine too closely. "There," pointing, whispered Catherine. "That is what we need." To the stand moved Ezekiel and carefully opened the book. Thick parchment were the pages covered in meticulous handwriting. Names and dates going back to 1800. Ritual descriptions written in clinical detail, like scientific experiments rather than atrocities. He began reading, and with each entry, his horror deepened. Not just occasional violence had these men committed. Systematic they had made it. Regular gatherings every 6 weeks, rituals timed to agricultural cycles, believing blood-fed land. At least 37 people over the years they had killed, probably more. Mostly enslaved people, but also poor whites, indigenous people, anyone vulnerable. And notes about consumption. Not just killed had they had eaten. Pieces of victims prepared specific ways consumed during ritualistic meals they believed transferred power. "Dear God," whispered Ezekiel. "This is worse than I imagined." "Tried to tell you I did," flat was Catherine's voice. "Them I watched when I was 12. I watched them cut pieces from that woman on the altar. I watched my father raise a goblet and drink. Then 16 years I spent being told I was insane, that I imagined it all. But I knew. Always I knew. Pages turned Ezekiel looking for entries about his family. In October 1838 he found them. 3 lines. Purchased family unit from Virginia. Woman Sarah. Children Benjamin and Ruth. Separated from male to demonstrate resolve. Sent to Alabama contact. Payment received. 3 lines. That was all his family's destruction merited. Take this we need, said Ezekiel, voice tight with rage. No, on his arm Catherine's hand. If now we take it, immediately they will know. Copy first, we need the most important entries. Right she was. But everything to burn wanted Ezekiel. But revenge required patience, required being smarter than the enemy. 3 hours they spent working. Paper and ink had brought Catherine. Entries about specific rituals she copied, focusing on one's naming current members. Victims documented Ezekiel, creating a list of names and dates that could potentially be cross-referenced with other records. Exhausting work made worse by the content. Several times had to stop Ezekiel, hands shaking too badly. Once entirely left the chamber Catherine, overcome by memories, but slowly, methodically, they built their case. Page after page of evidence. So focused they were, neither heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. When light flared in the outer chamber was the first indication something was wrong, lantern light much brighter than their single lamp. Sharply up looked Ezekiel, blood going cold. In the doorway stood Silas Rutledge, flanked by 2 other men. Behind them, at least 4 more figures in the main cellar. I must admit, calmly said Silas, impressed I am. That the inner chamber you would find, I did not think. Slowly stood Catherine, placing herself between her father and Ezekiel. In Charleston you were supposed to be. Supposed to be I was, but your miraculous recovery I never trusted. So arrangements I made. This morning I left, yes, but this afternoon I returned and watched the house all evening, waiting to see what you would do. Into the chamber he stepped, the 2 men blocking the exit. That I would not anticipate this, did you really think? That I would not prepare for the possibility you might remember, might seek revenge? You have been poisoning me for 16 years, steady despite everything was Catherine's voice. And that I would simply accept it, you expect. Understand that it was necessary, I expect you to. Something you should not have, a child saw you. Could not allow you to destroy everything I could. 12 I was and I watched you murder a woman and eat her flesh. Fear that was not, Father. To witnessing evil, a reasonable response that was. Evil? Such a simple word. Further into the room moved Silas, eyes moving between Catherine and Ezekiel. And you, using my daughter to get to me, with ideas of revenge filling her head. Nothing, said Ezekiel, calculating distances and odds. 7 men against 1, with Catherine in no condition to fight. Hopeless looked the situation. Anything foolish do not do, seemed to read his thoughts Silas. To hurt either of you I do not want. Not permanently, but this rebellion continuing I cannot have. To the men behind him he gestured. Upstairs, bring them. What happens next, we need to discuss. To Silas's study they were taken and locked inside together. Windowless was the room except for one high transom, impossible to reach. Heavy oak was the door, locked from outside. As soon as they were alone, to Ezekiel moved Catherine. "Are you hurt?" "No, miss, but in serious trouble we are." "Yes, but not as much as you think." From inside her dress she pulled something. The papers they had been copying. "These I managed to keep." Me he did not search. Too confident. "Help that will not if dead we are. Die we are not going. Not tonight." Calculating were Catherine's eyes. "Without killing me if possible, my father will want to resolve this. His daughter still I am, his blood. That gives us leverage." Over the next hour, they heard arrivals, voices in the hall, men gathering, the brethren was assembling. Finally, the door opened. There stood Marcus Fanning, face grim. "For you they are ready. Peacefully come, unharmed you will not be." To the cellar again they were led. This time, transformed had been the main chamber. All 13 brethren members present, dressed in ritual robes. In every holder burned candles. With crimson cloth was draped the altar. 13 chairs arranged in a perfect circle, all occupied except Silas's at the altar's head. In the circle's center were positioned Ezekiel and Catherine, forced to stand facing Silas. With expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility watched the other members. His hood removed Silas. "Brothers of the harvest, for coming on short notice thank you. A crisis we face. Our inner chamber discovered my daughter and her associate. The ledger they saw. Entries they were copying when I interrupted them." Up spoke Judge Pelham. "Then silenced permanently they must be. Complicated this is not." "Disagree I do." Upper hand held Silas. "Blood is my daughter. Without exhausting other options, simply dispose of her I cannot. And an opportunity the man represents." "What opportunity?" asked Reverend Crenshaw. "Something I have long believed to test. That through their own actions, a person can be drawn into our work if framed correctly." To Ezekiel turned Silas. "Revenge on me you want. For what I did to your family, destroy me you want. Understand that I do. But a different kind of revenge I offered you, a more meaningful one." "I do not understand," carefully said Ezekiel. "Membership I am offering you, not as an equal. As full members, men of color the brethren does not accept, but as an associate. Our gatherings you would attend, in rituals participate, and in exchange, what you want most I would give you. Dead is my family. What I want, you cannot give me. No, but against the people who killed them, revenge I can give you. The plantation owner in Alabama who your wife and children to death worked. Edward Gaines is his name. Of the brethren part he is not. From us, no protection has he. If join us you do, your loyalty prove, to destroy him resources I will give you. Money, information, whatever you need to make him suffer as you have suffered." In the air hung the offer, obscene in its calculation. Join the men who destroyed his family to get revenge on another monster. And if refuse I, then both you and Catherine die tonight. Into the swamp go your bodies. What happened, never will anyone know. Burned will be the papers Catherine was copying. Destroyed her journals. continues everything as it always has. His hand spread Silas. But if except you do, live you do. Lives Catherine. Your revenge you get. Your soul is all it costs. At Catherine looked Ezekiel. Pale was her face, but the slightest shake of her head she gave him. Do not do it. Whatever happens, become them do not. But about accepting was thinking Ezekiel, about getting inside their organization, about gathering more evidence, about buying time. Back at Silas he looked and Catherine. To her what happens? To her room she returns, her medications resumes, what she has seen forgets. Is the alternative she dies alongside you? No. Across the chamber cut Catherine's voice. Again forget I will not. Silenced I will not be. If you must, kill me father, but that I do not know what you are, pretend I will not. Hardened Silas's expression. Wait, quickly spoke Ezekiel. Except I do. But on one condition, free goes Catherine. Not back to her room. Free. This house let her leave. South Carolina let her leave. To start over, give her money. If that you do, join you I will. Head shook several brethren members. But spoke Judge Pelham. A point the boy makes. Already broken is the girl. Even if spoke she, believe her who would? But a man willing to join us, to be complicit. Valuable that is. That our power extends even to those who hate us, that proves. Considered Silas. Finally, he nodded. Very well. North will be sent Catherine. In Philadelphia associates I have who will take her in. A new identity and stipend to live on will be given her, but to South Carolina never return she can. From her old life, never contact anyone. To everyone here, dead she will be. Agreed. At Ezekiel stared Catherine. No, to leave you I will not. Agreed, interrupted Ezekiel. Free she goes. Join you I. Then a bargain we have. To the others turned Silas. Tomorrow leaves Catherine. In 3 weeks at the next regular gathering will be Ezekiel's initiation. Until then, under watch at Cypress Grove he remains. If escape he tries or anyone contact, void is the deal and both die. Understood. Nodded Ezekiel. Like she wanted to argue looked Catherine, but her eye caught Ezekiel and slightly shook his head. Trust me. The next morning left Catherine. At dawn, a closed carriage took her away. From his cabin window watched Ezekiel as it rolled down the long drive and into the trees disappeared. To say goodbye, she had not been allowed. With her after the confrontation in the cellar, to speak he had not been allowed. But as to her room she had been escorted the previous night, back at him once she had looked, and in her eyes he had seen something that gave him hope. Understood she did. That truly surrendered he had not, she knew. Strategy this was, not defeat. The question was whether to Philadelphia actually she would go or whether her own plan she had. The 3 weeks that followed were the longest of Ezekiel's life. Under constant watch he was kept. Everywhere followed him 2 overseers. To leave the plantation grounds, he was not allowed. To keep him occupied, menial work he was given, meaningless tasks that accomplished nothing but filled time. but to the main house he was also given access, to the study where his papers kept Silas, to the cellar where the next gathering would take place. Him they were watching, yes, but him they were also testing, seeing if escape he would try, seeing if sabotage he would attempt. Neither did Ezekiel do. The role of defeated man who had made a pragmatic choice for survival he played. Quiet he was, obedient, no questions asked, no problems caused. But everything he was observing, learning the routines of the house, noting which slaves could be trusted, which overseers were cruel, which brethren members visited regularly. Of how everything worked, a mental map he was building, looking for weaknesses. And at night, alone in his cabin, about what was coming he thought. Their rituals would require participation, his initiation. Him they would test. Complicit in something horrible they would want to make him, so never expose them he could without destroying himself. About how far he was willing to go he thought, what lines he would not cross, even for revenge, whether any act so terrible existed that justice did not justify it. Good answers to those questions he did not have. On June 2nd, the night before his initiation, to his cabin came Silas. Late after midnight it was. To knocking woke Ezekiel and opened the door to find his owner standing there alone. "May I come in?" Aside stepped Ezekiel. Entered Silas and looked around the sparse room. Finally, he spoke. "Tomorrow, one of us you will become. Not fully, never fully, but enough. What that means, I want you to understand." To what I agreed, I understand. Do you? Truly do you? Uninvited, on the single chair sat Silas. For 43 years has existed the Brethren. In that time, never have we lost a member to exposure. Never had someone break our code of silence. Why do you know? Equally guilty is everyone. Partly, but also because of each other we take care. A man joins the Brethren and suddenly doors open. Business opportunities appear. Legal problems disappear. In difficulty find themselves enemies. Not just a society we are, Ezekiel. Across the entire South, a network of power that extends we are. Once part of that network you are, even as an associate, to resources you cannot imagine, access you will have. And in exchange, people I help you murder. Not flinch did Silas. In exchange, the natural order help us maintain you do, the strong over the weak, the powerful over the powerless. How the world has always worked, that is. It we simply acknowledge and to our advantage use. My family you killed to demonstrate your commitment to that order. I did, and again I would do it because weakness is sentiment. Weakness is love. The moment about individuals more than about power care you allow yourself, already lost you have. Forward leaned Silas. But here is what I want you to understand. Dead is your family. Nothing you do will change that. But that their deaths meant something, you can ensure. The power the Brethren offers you can to prevent other families from suffering the same fate. From inside our organization work you can to make changes, to push for less brutal treatment of slaves, to advocate for better conditions. A voice at our table you will have that is worth something. Almost convincing it was, almost. The idea that some kind of reformer from within could become Ezekiel, using his position to help others, but a trap he knew it was, a rationalization. The moment in their rituals he participated, compromised he would be. The moment their power he accepted, corrupted by it he would be. "Why me this you are telling?" asked Ezekiel. "Because succeed I want you to. Because as an ally having you is more valuable than as an enemy having you. Because your family I killed, but you kill I do not want to." Stood Silas. "Tomorrow night, something difficult to do you will be asked. Something that will test whether truly to this path you commit. You now I am telling, whatever you are asked to do, do it. Do not hesitate. Do not show weakness, because if the test you fail, both you and Catherine die. Yes, know I that in Philadelphia not really she is. Know I that somewhere hiding she is, her own revenge planning. But for her, people watching I have. The moment she surfaces, if yourself proven you have not, found and killed she will be. Understand you do. Through Ezekiel flooded ice. Alive was Catherine, but in danger she was. And whether she lived or died would determine his actions tomorrow. Understand I, quietly he said. Nodded Silas, and without another word left. Alone in the dark cabin sat Ezekiel, thinking about the impossible position he was in. In something monstrous tomorrow he had to participate. To monsters himself prove he had to. Complicit in evil become he had to, or another way find he had to. A third option that neither Silas nor the brethren anticipated. Out he pulled the paper with his family's names, looked at them in the moonlight coming through the window. "Forgive me," he whispered, "for what I'm about to do, for what I have to become. For nothing it will not be, I promise you." At midnight on June 3rd began the gathering. To the cellar was brought Ezekiel by two brethren members who stripped him to the waist and tied his hands behind his back. Down the stairs they led him into the candle-lit chamber where all 13 members waited in their robes. At the altar's head stood Silas. "Brothers of the harvest, tonight an initiation unlike any in our history we conduct. Into our circle we bring a man who every reason to hate us has, a man who everything has lost because of what we represent. To prove that our power extends even to our enemies we do this. That anyone can be brought into the fold if the price is right." He gestured, and two more brethren members brought forward a figure bound and gagged, struggling weakly. On the altar they placed the person and stepped back. A young woman it was, enslaved, maybe 18 or 19 years old, terrified. "This is your test, Ezekiel," said Silas. "To join us, in our ritual you must participate. The knife you must take and the first cut make. That your desire for revenge against gains is stronger than your moral objections to our methods, you must prove. If refuse you, here tonight die you. If accept you, one of us become you, and the man who killed your family, destroy we help you." Low rhythmic sounds in a language Ezekiel did not recognize began chanting the other brethren members. Flickered the candles. On the walls danced shadows. Out held Silas a knife. Long blade, wickedly sharp, handle wrapped in leather. "Take it. The choice make." At the woman on the altar looked Ezekiel. Crying she was, trying to scream through the gag. His found her eyes. And in them every enslaved person who had ever suffered at the hands of people like the brethren he saw. Sarah he saw, Benjamin, Ruth. Himself he saw. At the knife he looked, at Silas, at the 13 men watching to see what he would do. This was the moment, the point where either a monster he would become or die resisting. But a third option there was, one for 3 weeks he had been planning, one that required perfect timing and absolute commitment. The knife he took. Approvingly nodded the brethren members. Smiled Silas. In intensity increased the chanting. Toward the altar stepped Ezekiel. With terror went wide the woman's eyes. The knife he raised, and then he moved not toward the woman, toward the nearest brethren member. In the candlelight flashed the knife and itself in the man's throat buried before anyone could react. Blood sprayed. Collapsed the man. The fallen member's robe grabbed Ezekiel, pulling it off in one motion. Over the nearest candles he threw it, plunging half the room into darkness. Erupted chaos. Through the confusion he moved like violence incarnate. Years of rage focused into action. Another man he grabbed, using him as a shield as someone swung at him, threw the body into 2 more members, tangling them, out at a knee kicked, heard bone crack, a candle holder grabbed, and into a face smashed it. Powerful men were the brethren, but fighters they were not. Soft, privileged, used to others doing violence for them were they. None of those things was Ezekiel. Toward the altar he fought where the woman lay, grabbed her, cut her bonds with the knife he had somehow kept hold of. Run, up the stairs he shouted. Run! Off the altar she scrambled and fled. Back to face the remaining brethren members turned Ezekiel, 7 of them still standing, blocking the stairs. A terrible mistake you have made, said Silas, his voice steady despite the carnage. Yourself and Catherine both you have killed. Maybe, said Ezekiel, but with me as many of you as I can, I will take. What he did not know was that above them in the main house, returned had Catherine. To Philadelphia never gone had she. In the slave quarters hiding she had been, waiting, planning, gathering allies among the enslaved people of Cypress Grove. And when from the cellar the commotion she heard, when the young woman burst from the kitchen screaming she saw, time it was she knew. The reckoning. For 3 weeks recruiting had spent Catherine. From plantation to plantation under cover of darkness she had moved. To enslaved people she had known her whole life speaking, people who had watched her grow up, who had suffered under her father's ownership. About the brethren she told them, about the cellar, about the rituals, and she told them that tonight the night was they could end it. 23 people came, men and women who nothing left to lose had, who children to the brethren's rituals had lost, who friends into the swamps disappear had watched, who decades of brutality from men who believed themselves untouchable had endured. With tools from the fields they came armed, axes, scythes, hammers. With rage that for generations had been building, they came. When the young woman from the cellar burst, down led them Catherine. The brethren members, still trying to subdue Ezekiel, them coming did not hear until too late it was. Into the cellar like a tide flooded the enslaved people. What followed, no mercy in it was, no hesitation. These were people who their entire lives had been told they were property, that their suffering did not matter, that their lives no value had. Now how wrong those beliefs were, they were proving. Fight tried the brethren. A pistol pulled Judge Pelham but was struck down before he could fire. For mercy begged Reverend Crenshaw and received none. Up the stairs tried to flee Marcus Fanning and was dragged back down. Silas Rutledge, seeing everything collapse around him, one last desperate play tried. Catherine he grabbed, pulling her to him with a knife at her throat. Stop! Stop or kill her eye. Still went the room. With no fear in her eyes at her father looked Catherine. Do it. Kill me. Nothing it changes. Already lost you have. Escape still I can. Still I can? Nothing still you can. Cold was Catherine's voice. 16 years you spent trying to break me, trying to make me forget, trying to convince me I was mad. But failed you did. Everything I remembered. And die you watch I am going to. Back into his ribs with sudden vicious force she drove her elbow. Loosened his grip. Away she spun. And before recover could Silas, there was Ezekiel. Faced each other they, the enslaved man and the plantation owner. All the power Silas had held, all the privilege and cruelty, all the years of believing himself untouchable. None of it mattered now. Everything from me you took, quietly said Ezekiel. My wife, my children, my life. For no reason except that you did it, to prove something to men who cruelty over humanity valued. Please, said Silas. Just that one word, pathetic and desperate. Please did my wife say? Please did my son? Please did any of the people you killed in this cellar? His head shook Ezekiel. No mercy. Not for you. Not ever. What happened next was brutal and final. Sure made the enslaved people none of the brethren survived. 13 men who had believed themselves above consequence learned in their final moments that power was an illusion. That home always came cruelty eventually. When over it was, in the center of the cellar stood Catherine, surrounded by bodies. Shaking she was, not from fear but from release. 16 years of rage finally given outlet. To her came Ezekiel. Are you hurt? No. Are you? Minor cuts. Nothing serious. Around at the carnage he looked. Now what do we do? Now. Grim was Catherine's smile. Now all we burn. The cellar, the ledger, the evidence. Every trace of what happened here, we destroy. But that evidence could prove what they did. Could bring justice. Justice? Bitterly laughed Catherine. Around looked Ezekiel. This is justice. The only kind we were ever going to get. If to authorities that ledger we try to take, what happens? Hunted down and killed we are. The surviving brethren members in other counties for us come. Only if an accident everyone believes the Cypress Grove chapter died in, this ends. If no evidence there is, no witnesses, no story to tell. Right she was and knew it Ezekiel. Then burn it we. The next 2 hours they spent preparing. The enslaved people who had helped them left before dawn, disappearing back to their various plantations. Nothing they would say. Nothing they had seen. Nothing they knew. That was how survival worked. Through the cellar poured oil. Catherine and Ezekiel, stacked wood and kindling, placed the bodies in positions that might look like an accident if anyone investigated. Then the ledger and all the journals they took and in the center of the altar placed them. Wait, said Ezekiel. One last time opened he the ledger and found the entries about his family. Carefully out tore he those pages and folded them, placing them inside his shirt. For them, so forgotten they are not. Nodded Catherine. Then a candle she took unto the oil-soaked wood held it. Immediately caught the fire. Within minutes, ablaze was the cellar. Up the stairs and out of the house they fled, stood in the yard, watching as flames engulfed Cypress Grove Plantation. People would come. Other plantations would see the smoke. Questions there would be, but their story prepared had Catherine and Ezekiel. A terrible accident. In the cellar, a candle knocked over. The master and his guests trapped below. So tragic, so terrible, the truth would never anyone know. As over the burning ruins rose the sun, to Ezekiel turned Catherine. Now what will you do? North go. Of this fire use the chaos to disappear. Maybe others who want to fight find, to create a network that can help people escape. Out he pulled the paper with his family's names. Back bring them I cannot, but that others do not suffer the same fate, make sure I can. And north as well I will go. From my father's accounts for years, the money I have been stealing, use. Start over, she paused. But forget I will not. Everything that happened here, I will document. All of it down I will write so that someday, somehow, the truth someone knows. Your testimony too they will seal if public you try to make it. Then hide it I will. Code it I will. Where to be found decades from now when all dead we are and us hurt it cannot, leave it I will. At the burning house she looked. Eventually, a way of surfacing has the truth. Even when bury it people try. Until the fire burned itself out stayed they, until nothing but ash and blackened timbers was Cypress Grove Plantation, until nothing left to show was there that 13 men had gathered there to commit atrocities. Then in opposite directions walked they away, Catherine north toward Charleston and eventually Philadelphia, Ezekiel west toward the frontier, where enslaved people could disappear into communities that no questions asked. Each other again never saw they. Exactly as they had planned was the official story, a tragic accident. Silas Rutledge and 12 prominent gentlemen meeting at Cypress Grove to discuss business when a fire broke out. In the cellar, all 13 perished, overcome by smoke before they could escape. For Colleton County, a terrible loss. Funerals with full honors. Eulogies praising their contributions to society. In the fire as well was reported to have died Catherine Rutledge. Her father's mad daughter trapped in her room, unable to escape, a particularly sad footnote to an already tragic event. No one questioned it. No one looked too closely. Nothing said the enslaved people who had participated. Reason to speak they had no and every reason to remain silent. Within months, most were sold to different plantations as Cypress Grove was liquidated. Across South Carolina and beyond they scattered, their secret with them to their graves carrying. Years passed. Eventually demolished were the ruins of Cypress Grove. The land sold, new buildings constructed. As it always does, moved on life, covering over the past with the present. But whispers persisted. In slave quarters late at night, stories told about the plantation where the masters burned. About the night justice came to men who thought themselves untouchable. About the woman and the man who made it happen. With each telling changed the stories, becoming legend, becoming myth. But the core remained. That consequences had cruelty. That absolute was not power. That sometimes the powerless their power found. In 1863, during the Civil War, the area where Cypress Grove had stood was occupied by Union troops. Of old tunnels beneath the property, they found evidence, found bones in the nearby swamp, found markings on trees that suggested ritual sites, but on move the war, and to investigate further, time had no one. In 1971, during demolition work, a journal was found sealed in a wall. Everything it detailed: names, dates, rituals, victims. But as Catherine had predicted, coded it was. And before anyone could fully decode it, from county records vanished the journal. Destroyed it was, some say, by descendants of the Brethren families protecting their ancestors' secrets. Taken it was, others say. Somewhere still exists it, a few believe, waiting to be rediscovered when the time is right. What is known is this. In a fire in 1841, 13 prominent men died. Shortly afterward disappeared Catherine Rutledge, though confirmed found never was a body. To a plantation in Alabama was reported sold an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross, but exists no record of the transaction. And for years afterward, among enslaved communities circulated stories about a network helping people escape, led by a man who had faced the monster and won. True were those stories or just wishful thinking, for certain no one can say. But sometimes not in official records lies truth, but in the stories people tell, in the memories they keep, in the justice they remember, even when forget tries history. That power built on cruelty is never as solid as it seems, this mystery shows us. That eventually find light secrets kept in darkness. That the most dangerous power of all often hold the people deemed powerless. The power of witness, the power of memory, the power of refusing to forget. What of this story do you think? Everything was revealed, do you believe? That somewhere still exists that journal waiting to be found, do you think? Below leave your comment. If you enjoyed this tale and more dark historical mysteries like this, want to Liturgy of Fear, subscribe. The notification bell hit so a story you never miss, and this video with someone who loves mysteries that blur the line between history and horror share. Remembered need to be these stories. Heard need to be these voices. In the next video, see you.